It seems like creatives always get a bad rap.
From childlike tantrums and ridiculous green room requests to strange superstitions and even self-mutilation, it's clear that artists have plenty of strange habits.
But they've also made a pretty big impact on the world.
Hi, I'm Kate Rooney.
And I'm Jess Guffey.
And you're listening to Creatives Are the Worst, presented by Design Pickle, the leading flat-rate graphic design and creative services platform.
In this podcast, we'll be uncovering the fascinating myths and shocking stories behind the artists we love, or in some cases, love to hate, as we try to determine, are creatives the worst? Hello, and welcome to Creatives Are the Worst, a podcast presented by Design Pickle. I am Jess Guffey, and I'm joined by my very wonderful co-host, Kate Rooney. Hi, Kate.
Hi, Jess. What's going on?
You know, we're shaking it up this week. It's a Tuesday. We don't usually record on Tuesdays, but keeping it spicy over here.
That's true. Yeah, I'm excited for the story. It's a wild one.
I'm excited too because I have no idea who you're covering, but I do know that it's a quintessential Kate story is all I know. So I have no idea what that means.
I wouldn't say that because I don't want to attach my name to this person, but hopefully by a Kate story it just includes my ridiculousness. I don't know. We'll find out.
We'll determine that throughout.
But how's your leg doing?
Okay. The reason Kate's asking me that is because I have fire ant bites everywhere. It's a long story. I've never had fire ant bites before, but I am not thriving, to say the very least.
They're called fire ants for a reason, and they're going to fire us up today for today's episode.
Who would have thought tiny little creatures could cause so much havoc? Not me. Not me.
Well,
anyways.
Before we dive in, obviously, per usual, this is all just based off the research we've done, and opinions are our own, but we'd always love to hear from our listeners. If we miss anything or if you're angry at us, let us know at podcast@designpickle.com.
If you'd like to storm our podcast studios with pitchforks and yell mean things, you can do that virtually by sending us a note at podcast@designpickle.com.
It's so cute that you called it a podcast studio.
Yeah, I'm just trying to give us some street cred here, so.
Yeah, that's our houses.
Our bedrooms, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay, so now, before I actually dive in, though, I feel like I need to get like a chant going to really pump me up. So,
oh boy.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's get a chant going here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah! Jerry! We are covering the infamous Jerry Springer today.
No, we are not.
We are. And I know this is kind of a departure from what we normally do because maybe some people wouldn't consider Jerry Springer to be creative. He most certainly is a creative.
Oh, I believe it, and I'm excited to hear about all the ways that he is a creative because I can only imagine the lengths that he goes to.
Jess, did you ever watch the Jerry Springer show?
Yes.
At any point in your life?
Uh-huh. In college, for whatever reason, we would turn it on late at night and watch it, and yeah, it's a wild time.
Just to maybe feel better about yourself. I don't know.
Probably.
At night.
Probably.
Yeah,
I
learned.
Stoked to hear about him.
I don't even know. Jerry Springer is one of those people where it's like they're just in your life for whatever reason, but you can't pinpoint why. Because
100%.
I know for sure my parents were not playing the Jerry Springer show on a regular basis, but I clearly had watched it at some point and knew the chant, knew everything about that, did not know all of the crazy stuff that went on beyond the show.
I'm so excited.
We're going to cover that today. But really kind of starting with his birth and childhood, which is a crazy story in its own right because, let's just jump in, shall we? In 1944, Gerald Norman Springer was born in the London Underground station of Highgate, which was used as a shelter from German bombing in World War II. So we are just...
Oh, boy.
Yeah, we are right in the throes of World War II. His parents, Margot and Richard, they are Jewish refugees that had escaped from Landsberg, Germany, which doesn't exist anymore. That's now Poland. But yeah, it was bad. Real bad, bad, bad.
Yeah.
In fact, they had to leave their parents, so Jerry Springer's grandparents, behind. This is a bit dark, but his maternal grandmother, Marie, she was left behind. She was killed in the gas trucks. His
oh my God.
Paternal grandmother, Selma, she also died at the hospital in, I'm going to butcher this, Theresienstadt, a concentration camp.
That sounded good.
Thank you.
I mean, it's not good because it's a concentration camp, but your pronunciation sounded good.
Yeah, her brother, Herman, who was a famous doctor in Berlin, also died there, was killed there. They basically had to leave everyone behind to escape to London.
Wow.
And at one point, Jerry Springer said in an interview, all of our family was exterminated by the Nazis, but my mother and father survived. The train stations were used by people as shelter, and that was where I was born.
Wow.
So we're kind of starting off with a little bit of a dark story here, but I didn't know that his parents were, or he was, born in the height of World War II, and they had to escape Nazi Germany, and that his own family had been killed by Nazis. So, yeah.
When you think about his persona, you don't associate it with that kind of birth story in any way.
I most certainly did not, until I started reading a little bit more about some things that he would feature on the show, and then I was like, oh, that kind of makes sense. We'll get to that later, so put that in your pocket for later. But in 1949, his family immigrates to the U.S. He's 5 years old this time, and they end up in Queens, New York.
Okay.
Yeah, so he ended up growing up in New York City. Some of his earliest memories, which I think is just hilarious, but one of his earliest memories is at 12 years old and watching the 1956 DNC, the Democratic National Convention, because that's what we were all doing at 12 years old, right?
Yeah, what? I don't even think I knew what Democrats and Republicans were when I was 12.
Yeah, no. I was like, oh, elephants? What? Those are cute.
Yeah. Donkeys? Okay.
But he was very impressed by John F. Kennedy. As a 12-year-old, he was like, I love that guy. He's going to be, he was like his political hero as a little kid. So then, like I said, he grew up in New York City. He ends up going to Tulane University and earned a bachelor's degree in political science. And then do you know which school he ended up going to after that? Oh, okay. I'm just going to tell you because you're not guessing fast enough.
You didn't even give me a beat, man. I barely processed the question.
I know. Well, he got his JD from Northwestern University.
Randomly, I feel like I did know that because of alum lists that get put out, or alumni lists rather, that get put out. I feel like I did know that to a certain degree, but bury it way deep in my memories. Like many things in our life, just recovered memories.
That'll come up as a recovered memory later.
Yep, sure will.
So yeah, he gets his JD from Northwestern, and after that, he becomes a political campaign advisor to Kennedy. So his political hero that he watched as a 12-year-old and admired, He actually made that become a reality. Except that later that year, that's when Kennedy was assassinated. So that dream was cut a little bit short. But because of this tragic event, he kind of pivots, and he ends up just joining a law firm in Cincinnati. So he's in the law space, kind of taking a break from politics.
Isn't it interesting, though, that he was 12 and, captivated by the DNC and then ended up going to law school? I feel like that's the case with a lot of people we cover, is that they get hyper-focused on things at a really young age, and then they end up doing that thing. And it's how do you know? Why are you drawn to that when you're 12, 10, 8, whatever years old?
What was your
politics of all things?
Dream job when you were 12 years old, Jess?
Oh gosh, I had many. I think at that point I wanted to be a doctor, which stayed true until college.
You're my doctor now.
Yeah, sure. We'll call it that. What about you? I need to hear.
I'm pretty sure I wanted to be like a dolphin trainer at SeaWorld, and
didn't we all?
That aged well.
That's it. That's the tweet.
I was not watching the DNC and like, that's it. No. That's the person that I want to be an advisor to, and then actually made that happen. Just unfortunately, that candidate was assassinated. So,
so gnarly.
Yeah. But then in 1970, he dives back into politics and he runs for Congress. So spoiler alert, he didn't win, but he took 45% of the vote, which is actually pretty crazy because it was in a traditionally Republican district and he was running as a Democrat. So it was like,
wow.
Yeah. And one big thing that he was campaigning for was to lower the voting age. And that was like a big thing at the time. So he kind of like went above and beyond and almost won, but didn't work out.
Wow.
And
he's got some chutzpah.
Yeah, but in the meantime, so he was also an Army reservist. And when all of this was going on, he was actually called to active duty and was deployed to Fort Knox. So it kind of, again, halted his political career for a second. But he resumed campaigning after he was discharged. And then was elected to Cincinnati City Council.
Okay, so, starting small.
I mean, did you know that he was a politician prior to his...
I had no idea.
I didn't either. That rocked my world to find out that he was, like, so high up in the ranks, but...
Yeah, like, serious about it, too. Like, running for Congress is no joke. So.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
So he was elected to Cincinnati City Council in 1971. I'm going to just do a quick sidebar here because I want to note some of his personal life, but it doesn't really fit anywhere else. But in 1973, this is when he married his now ex-wife, Mickey. She's always been very private, so we don't know a lot about her, but they ended up divorcing 21 years later. But they had a daughter during that time, and she was born with birth defects. She was born without a nasal passage, and was legally blind and deaf in one ear. So
wow.
I thought this was really interesting because there's actually a bunch of articles from Jerry Springer saying how he and his wife just wanted her to have like a normal lifestyle and, really believe that she could like push beyond her disabilities and become just a regular, that's not the right word, but just become like a well-functioning citizen without, being hindered by all this. So, and she did. She continued to live a normal life and ended up dedicating her life to helping other children with disabilities. So
I love that.
Yeah. A quick sidebar there. But now we're going back to some other crazy stuff. So in 1974, he ended up having to resign from Cincinnati City Council because police, get ready for this. Police raided a massage parlor in Fort Wright, Kentucky. Jerry.
I can see where this is going.
Oh, yeah. So they ended up finding a bad check from Jerry Springer. The massage parlor, I'm just going to add here for our listeners, that's usually kind of like a cover for prostitution in most places, in most cases.
See Robert Kraft if you want to know more details about that.
Most certainly in this case. So this massage parlor had like an invoice pinned to their wall when the police raided, and it said, for services rendered written on it, but it was from Jerry Springer. So they knew that it was him.
God.
Basically, he was writing bad checks for soliciting prostitution and was caught for it. However, on the flippity flop, he totally came clean about it. Like there was no, he didn't try to tiptoe around it. He just had a press conference, was like, yep, I was
very refreshing of him.
And that's what happened. So that's the truth. And that actually helped him. Yeah.
You know what that makes me think of is that really bad city councilman in Parks and Rec that gets caught for prostitution over and over again. And he's like, what? I have 10 wives. It's fine. It's fine. I'm fine.
100%. Oh, what is his name? I love that. I mean, I don't love that character, but it's so such a great parody or satirical view of what goes on in politics.
100%. Anyways.
Yeah, so it helped him. It helped him. He ended up winning his seat back for city council by a landslide. Isn't that crazy? He got caught for writing bad checks for a massage parlor, and people were like, you know what? You're the guy. Let's do this.
You know what? I do feel like sometimes with public figures, and it doesn't matter if they're a musician or a politician or whatever, I think people have they're a lot more willing to forgive people that are like, you know what? I fucked up. And that's it. I'm coming clean about it. I'm not trying to skirt around it. I'm being honest about it. Like, I have more respect for that. Everyone fucks up. We're all humans. So,
yep.
Respect, Jerry.
Respect. So, now we're in the 80s, 1982. He sought the Democratic nomination for the governor of Ohio.
Whoa.
And he actually used this whole controversy to help him campaign. There were campaign commercials with him referencing him using the check to pay a prostitute. And there would be like a voiceover is like, he's not afraid of the truth, even if it hurts.
Genius, perhaps. I don't know how to take that.
I mean, again, like, you're not going to hide from it. People are going to find out. So why not use it? I mean, he ended up not winning the nomination, but still, I don't know. I think people had respect for him because of that.
Yeah.
So because he didn't win the nomination, he again kind of put his political career on hold, and he started working on a radio show. This was also kind of during his time in politics. He had started doing this, but then just kind of put all of his effort into radio and TV hosting, essentially.
Okay. Kind of makes sense. That makes more sense than politics for him, to be honest.
Oh, yeah. Well, knowing what we know now, it definitely makes sense. But it sounds like, I mean, he wanted to be Kennedy. Like, that was, like, his goal. But hard shift. Maybe he realized that people would see that he's written bad checks and was like, ooh, maybe I should do something else.
Right. Good choice, Jerry. Good choice.
So eventually he gets hired as a political reporter and commentator for Cincinnati's NBC affiliate called WLWT. And at the time he was hired, it was the lowest rated news program they had, but he becomes the primary news anchor, and all of a sudden it like picks up, like it becomes a hit. So it goes from like the lowest ranking program to like star time.
Wow.
And this is when he creates his signature line, which he says at the end of every Jerry Springer show episode: take care of yourself and each other.
That is such a news anchor vibe, but I never made that connection. All the times I've seen that show, but like that's how they end news programs. That's wow. Okay, mind blown a little bit.
Okay, so within 2 years of this, he becomes Cincinnati's #1 news anchor.
Good Lord.
Yeah, and then wins 10 local Emmy Awards for his nightly commentaries.
What? 10?
Uh-huh. So, yeah, it was like he totally changed this program, and he was really, really good at being a commentator or just offering, like, I don't know, political commentaries and whatnot.
Yeah.
And this would all eventually become, you'll see this in the Jerry Springer Show, but he also has, like, his final thought on the Jerry Springer Show, and that all came from his time being a Cincinnati news anchor.
Who would have thunk?
Mm-hmm. So then a Chicago-based station ends up hiring Springer as their news commentator, but this was a big mistake. Yeah, it was very unpopular. This is a station that was popular in Chicago, but the viewers did not like Jerry Springer. It caused a bunch of controversy within the network. And longtime anchor Carol Marin ended her 19-year run with the station because she refused to share airtime with him. Yeah. But soon after, her co-anchor, Ron Majors, he also cut ties with the show because Jerry was coming on board.
He's just knocking people down left and right.
I know. The two main anchors of the show just quit because they refused to work with him. And then at one point, Jerry says in an article, "I'm sorry she found it necessary this week to use me as the stepping stone to martyrdom."
Okay. That's icky. I don't like that at all.
Yeah, that's icky. But the whole thing was basically just like a huge PR and network rating nightmare. Yeah. So
that gives me the heebie-jeebies from a PR perspective.
Right? Yeah. What do you even do? But the whole thing, like the station couldn't even take the heat. So they ended up just dropping the show altogether after all this.
Whoa.
They lose their two anchors, and they tried to make it work with Jerry, but it just couldn't be fixed after all that. So they just stopped.
Just causing havoc. Okay, great. Like the fire ants.
All right, so he already has his, like, political career. He becomes a political commentator and has been on these different huge news shows in the East Coast, Midwest. But now it's time for him to start his own show.
Oh, man.
Mm-hmm. So in 1991, this is when the Jerry Springer Show is born. However, it was never meant to be this crazy, ludicrous freak show that we have now.
Yeah, I'm like waiting for the connection because I feel like, how? I will tell you how. It all comes back to ratings, of course, because that's where the money is. Please rate the show 5 stars. Please send help.
Going back to when he was hired for that Cincinnati show as a political commentator, this is the same station that started the Jerry Springer Show, but it was meant to mimic the Phil Donahue Show. Straight down to like how Jerry's hair was cut and the glasses he wore. Like they just wanted to recreate
imposters.
The Phil Donahue Show. Yeah, and it was supposed to be like a serious, politically oriented talk show. They covered topics like homelessness and gun laws. They had Jesse Jackson on the show, so it was meant to be very serious, highbrow political commentary. But guess what, Jess?
That didn't work for them?
Yeah, no. The ratings were not great. Not great. And the studio threatened to cancel the show if the ratings did not improve.
Goodness.
They had to do a whole overhaul of everything. They replaced the producers and just like revamped the whole format entirely just to get higher ratings. So they turned it into a more like tabloid sensationalism thing and
National Enquirer in a TV show is what I'm picturing.
Basically started featuring topics like I want my man to stop watching porn and like investigating like which things are sexier on women and stuff like that.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, it basically became just this whole circus where people are seeking their 15 minutes of fame. And you know what? It worked. Who is the Pickles' favorite artist?
I don't know.
It's Salvador Dili. Okay, that joke was the worst. But you know what's not the worst? Design Pickles flat rate, unlimited creative services.
No, it is not the worst, with Adobe source files included, brand profiles, unlimited users, smart designer match. We could go on and on all day.
There's a reason why Design Pickles ranked on the Inc. 5000 2 years in a row.
And you know what else isn't the worst? If you're listening to this podcast, you get $100 off your first month of any plan if you use the code WORST at checkout. It's pretty nice.
Yeah. Use checkout code WORST. It's WORST, all caps. And you can get $100 off any plan. So Essentials, our Pro plan, our Custom Illustrations plan. Start creating. It's awesome. And it's so fast. And we love it so much. And we're back. So we know that the Jerry Springer Show is famous for all of this mayhem and chaos, but Jess, did you know that it was also tied to murder? Oh no, not true crime too. Yeah, because I'm just another basic white B word. Of course, I love true crime, and so when I found out that there was a murder tied to the Jerry Springer Show, I absolutely had to include this. But yeah, it's seriously, like one of the first things you Google if you just search for the Jerry Springer shows, like all the articles that pop up from it.
Whoa.
So let's dive in, shall we? In 2000, the Jerry Springer Show taped an episode featuring married couple Ralph and Eleanor Panitz and Ralph's ex-wife, Nancy.
Oh, boy.
Get ready. This episode was titled Secret Mistresses Confronted.
Dun, dun, dun.
So this couple claimed, the couple Ralph and Eleanor claimed that Nancy was stalking them, but Nancy denied this, saying that she, Ralph, and Eleanor had spent the night together in a hotel just the day before.
Sketch.
And so basically it's a love triangle, if you would. Ralph and Nancy were married at one point, and then Eleanor came to the question, but then they were all sharing a house together.
What?
Yeah.
For why?
For why? Why for? I do not know. But the couple, they were trying to like humiliate Nancy into leaving them alone. And they were even getting the audience involved, like calling her fat and old and all this awful stuff. Then Nancy finds out that the couple had recently married without her knowledge before. So she's pissed at this point. She had no idea. And she just abruptly leaves the show just saying like, that's fine. Bye.
Oh boy.
Yeah. But then just literally hours, like a few hours after the broadcast, Nancy was found dead in the Sarasota, Florida home it's the home that the three of them were fighting over. And she was so badly beaten that it was hard to even identify who she was.
I hate that.
Dark. At this point, Ralph had a warrant out for his arrest for first-degree murder, and he tried to flee to Canada to avoid prosecution.
Idiot.
The biggest of idiots of all time. And it just became a whole debacle. Like, they were trying to find him, but then people were going to Jerry being like, what do you have to say for yourself? Because it kind of, like, sparked this, and they think, like, maybe them being on the show led to Nancy's murder. So Jerry Springer appears on Larry King Live to discuss, and he claims, like, I had nothing to do with the show and with all of this, and said that his show doesn't glamorize deviant behavior. I don't know. I may beg to differ, but
I'm gonna go with a hard nope on that, but okay.
Safe to say that deviant behavior is in every episode of... You watch the Jerry Springer Show for deviant behavior.
Pretty sure deviant behavior is the description of the show.
Right? Well, then 2 years later, in 2002, Ralph is finally convicted and sentenced to life in prison. And Nancy, the one who was killed, her sons file a lawsuit against Jerry Springer.
Knew that was coming.
Yeah, claiming that he had created a mood that led to murder. Now, we don't really know if that's exactly why, if Nancy would have been killed, regardless of whether or not they'd be on the show. But eventually they dropped all the claims. And yeah, just kind of like they swept it under the rug. But I'm sending you a photo of Nancy. She's on the left. That's on the Jerry Springer Show. And then on the right, that is Ralph and Eleanor when they were arrested. Ugh. Yeah. Dark.
Ugh.
I
don't even know how to describe it.
I know. I mean,
listeners.
It's just sad.
He has kind of a mullet.
He 100% has a mullet, for sure.
I think about this a lot because you and I love true crime, and like I feel like every murder story has a point of escalation that like causes the whole story to shift. And I feel like they could probably argue that being on the show was that moment for this case.
They did, and that's
really sad.
Yeah, that's why her sons were going after Jerry, but I'm sure they were bought out or something because all the charges were dropped. But
yeah.
Stuff like this is what led groups like the Parents Television Council and other, I don't know, groups that are against violence on TV and whatnot, trying to get advertisers to stop their sponsorships for the show. Even the show was banned in the UK during daytime hours.
Whoa.
Because it was just so, like, it's everything that you don't want your kids to see. There's violence, there's sex, there's lies, and just awful human behavior. And eventually it topped the TV Guide list of worst TV shows ever. But in class, okay, so going back to when Jerry Springer was caught in that sex scandal when he was running for city office, and he used all of that as like boosting it, saying like, yeah, I did it. It's the truth. I mean, even still at this point, Springer and the show producers would boast about all of this stuff and use it as kind of a form of self-deprecation and leaning into it, so to speak.
He's so, like, just like, he's gone from winning Emmys to like a Razzie for being the worst, and now being named the worst TV show. Like, yeah. Oh, how the mighty fall.
And they would do like bits on the show about how they're the worst TV show ever. So yeah, there was a lot of controversy with people trying to stop the show from being on air. But instead of doing that, something crazier happens. And that is called Jerry Springer the Opera.
Just when you thought it couldn't get worse.
I wouldn't even call it worse. I would just call it weirder.
True.
Okay, so this is obviously a musical about the Jerry Springer Show. Debuts in London in 2003. They toured all over
considering they were a band there.
Right? Well, they toured all over the UK, and obviously there was a lot of communities, particularly the Christian community in the UK, that protested this because the musical contains around 8,000 obscenities and bizarre like images such as a troupe of tap dancing Ku Klux Klan members and a showdown between Satan and a diaper-wearing Jesus.
What?
Now,
where do they come up with this stuff?
I don't know, but okay, it already sounds crazy until like then I actually read everything that's in this, and I debated whether or not I should keep this in, and I'm just going to do it. I'm going to give you a little synopsis of all this. So in Act 1, Jerry arrives at the talk show. His first guest, Dwight, is cheating on Peaches with Xandra. Jerry is briefly admonished by his inner Valkyrie. And I did have to look up this word. In Norse mythology, a Valkyrie is the chooser of the slain. It's a female figure who chooses who may die in battle and who may live. So he has an inner Valkyrie he's arguing with.
Okay.
Dwight is also cheating with a cross-dresser named Tremont. After a commercial break, Jerry's second guest, Montel, tells his partner, Andrea, that he likes to dress as a baby.
I'm sorry. Okay. Continue.
Okay.
I'll refrain from comments.
There's a lot. Likes to dress as a baby. Andy is cheating on her with Baby Jane, a woman who dresses as a little girl. So,
okay.
Jerry, he was in a couple of the productions, but then they had an actor come in to play Jerry. But at this point, Jerry continues to wrestle with his inner Valkyrie, and he has more guests. Chantel and her husband Chucky. She wants to be a stripper and demonstrates dance before her mother, Irene, arrives, and Irene attacks Chantel. Chucky pleads innocence, but Jerry's secret Jerry camera footage shows that Chucky is a patron of strip clubs and a KKK member.
Oh my God.
The Klan comes up on stage, and the warm-up man gives Montel a gun. The warm-up man jostles Montel, who accidentally shoots Jerry. So that's Act 1. That all happens in Act 1.
It's like he found every stereotype of someone that's not just a heteronormative, like it's just like every obscure reference to all the populations.
Yeah. And then there's like, it gets super religious and lots of KKK imagery, as we again alluded to before. With he featured that a lot in his show, and also had the background of his family escaping from Nazi Germany. So
I still don't understand the obsession, though. Like, wouldn't you not want to give that group any...
I think there's now this is just my personal opinion, but I'm guessing maybe there's just some deep rooted anger and issues about those groups, which it isn't weird in a sense, because they destroyed your family, but acting it out on Broadway isn't I mean, this wasn't on Broadway, to be clear, but shall I continue in Act 2?
I'm ready.
Jerry is found injured in a wheelchair, accompanied by his security man, Steve. The scene is in purgatory, a fog-enshrouded wilderness. Very mysterious. Ooh.
All right.
Jerry meets ghostly versions of his talk show guests who have all suffered unpleasant fates. Jerry tries to justify his actions to the ghosts. The warm-up man arrives and is revealed to be Satan. Just Satan shows up, per usual. Baby Jane asks Satan to spare Jerry's soul. Satan forces Jerry to return to hell with him to do a special show.
Oh, special show.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting, though? It feels like, I don't know how much Jerry had to do with the production of all of this, but doesn't it feel like this is his way of trying to come to terms with all of the stuff that's, his guilt for making the show a thing?
Yeah,
so
I feel like we are amateur / wannabe psychologists, but we could go on a whole tangent about the psychoanalysis behind this show and the meaning of everything, because there's a lot to unpack here.
So, okay, Act 3 is pretty long, so I'll try to skip through some stuff. But Act 3, Jerry arrives in hell at a charred version of his earthly TV studio. The audience is there, and they're locked into the walls somehow.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. Jerry reads cue cards produced by Baby Jane that introduce Satan, who's in charge of the proceedings. Satan seeks an apology for his expulsion from heaven and wants to reunite heaven and hell. Like, this is just so... What on earth is happening here?
Like, can you imagine watching this?
No.
Like, I think
can't.
you would just feel like you were on copious amounts of drugs if you're watching this.
Now, I will say, I did see the Book of Mormon live, and that was just a fantastic show. And I guess if you were reading the synopsis of that show and you didn't know anything about it, you might have that same reaction. So maybe that's where this is going, because all of this is in song form, except for Jerry, who has his speaking parts, but all of it's in song form. So maybe it's like really fun and entertaining, but it just sounds so crazy and ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but then they introduced Jesus onto the show.
Well, we had Satan, so we knew Jesus was coming.
Yeah, it makes sense. And this Jesus happens to resemble Montel, who's in the previous act. So Jesus and Satan are fighting on the show, on the Jerry Springer show, and then they bring out Adam and Eve, of course, and these characters represent Chucky and Chantel from the other Jerry Springer show. They all begin arguing with Jesus. Eve eventually attacks him. Mary, mother of Jesus, condemns him, and everyone turns against Jerry, who hopes for a miracle.
My eyes are going to pop out of my head.
I know. Then God and the angels arrive and ask Jerry to come to heaven and help God judge humanity. Like, what? Can we talk about a God complex here?
I just...
God is asking Jerry to help him judge humanity.
Wow. What an honor.
Well,
what an honor,
yeah,
Jerry.
It is an honor. So Jerry accepts the offer. But the angels and devils fight over Jerry, and the talk show host must find himself suspended over a pit of flames.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Then he just kind of like makes a statement to the audience. The devils, angels, and everyone sing a hymn. Then they end up back on solid ground. Baby Jane tells Jerry that he must go back to Earth. Jerry wakes up in his television studio, having been shot, his life ebbing away from him as he is cradled in Steve's arms.
Oh my God.
And then it ends with Jerry giving a final speech, and everyone is joined in sorrow. So that is the Jerry Springer opera.
First of all, I love that it's called an opera. Like, not just the musical, but like, let's just fancy it up a little bit and call it the opera. Like, do people get those masks that you wear at an opera to see better or like dress up?
It's just so bizarro. I almost do want to watch it, but I'm so afraid I'm going to have the same experience with Ringmaster, where like, oh, I think it's going to be so crazy and funny, and then I'm just hating life.
Yeah,
as I'm going through it. Other people felt the same though, because the BBC aired this on TV in 2005, and they got messages from 55,000 angry viewers who were just pissed about how ludicrous and awful this was.
Yeah.
Lots of protests about this. People were very angry about it. Yeah. The show did appear live in Las Vegas in 2007.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
Right. Oh, what a time to be alive. It was supposed to open on Broadway in 2005, but it was never produced. Shocking,
Wow.
I know.
This is my surprised face about that.
Yeah. I mean, around this time, this is when there was like the height of the criticism of the Jerry Springer Show. Not even the opera, just the show in general. People calling it TV's lowest life form. And author Bernard Goldberg included Jerry in the book 100 People Who Are Screwing Up America.
Yet another honor for the bookshelf or the mantle.
Right? Yeah, he claimed Springer was knowingly capitalizing on the disadvantages of his guests and the stupidity of his audience.
No comment there.
No comment. That's big. I keep going back to the audience, but I mean, the audience is such a big part of the show.
Yeah.
In those clips that I sent you, I mean, they make that episode with their oohs and ahs at every sentence, and then the chanting Jerry when a fight breaks out. Like, the audience kind of really adds to the show, but this author is claiming like Jerry knew how stupid his audience was, and
let's
made him famous.
Take a step back real quick. I mean, I alluded to this earlier, and we kind of touched on it, but like, Jerry's not an idiot. He has a law degree.
No.
He's Northwestern educated. No. Like, did he just get in so deep that he was like, well, we're gonna ride this out now? Like, why did he stay? Because obviously it was lucrative for him. He was making money. He was famous.
So much money.
But like,
so much money.
I feel like there's some disconnect between being a person that like is properly educated and like an attorney and then going there, and I cannot figure it out. The gap between those two things.
Yeah, he made. So I wonder how much money they made from the Too Hot for TV tapes alone. I mean, that was just one small thing, and it's crazy because it seems like obviously at one point, what was that? Early 2000s, late 90s. It was the number one show. It beat out Oprah.
Yeah.
So just money bags. Can't even. What do I do with all this money? I don't even know. But is it worth it? I don't know. If you were this like very intelligent political commentator, but you tapped into this one strange thing that just makes you a bajillionaire, but you know it's so awful for humanity, right. What do? That's a moral dilemma right there.
Well, and obviously he's had his fair share of not morally sound instances. So, like, I can kind of see it. True. But at the same time, doesn't that wear on you after a while? I don't know.
Well, that's why I think that the Jerry Springer opera is so fascinating because, I mean, it's so bizarre in its own right, but all of the religious imagery, you have the KKK in there, and then him having God ask Jerry to judge him, and then the devil saying that, you know, you've caused all of this, whatever. It's like, it seems like there is something that he's grappling with, but it just was a really bizarre way to demonstrate that or deal
Typical
with it,
creative.
so to speak. Yeah, right? Instead of going to therapy, we're just going to create an opera instead.
Casual. It's fine.
Oh, we should all be in therapy right now.
Yep.
Yeah. So in 2006, the show was renewed for its 16th season. And again, is just poking fun of itself at this point. They had like taglines that would be like, an hour of your life you'll never get back. And wasting technology since 1991.
True.
So yeah, they know, he knew it was bad. He knew it was awful, but...
Hey man, lean into the guilty pleasure angle all you can, I guess.
The broadcast is still running. At one point, they celebrate their 3,000th episode, and there was I think this was the fan favorite with Reverend Schnorr, a drunken, womanizing character that would get into heated arguments with the guests. He was a fake character, but he was like a recurring character, and people loved Reverend Schnorr.
I just like his name.
Yeah. At one point, the set moves from Chicago to Stanford just for cost reasons. And then in 2010, they celebrate their 20th anniversary episode. But I'm basically skipping over all, because like it was just the same thing, the same formula over and over again. And then in 2018, the show was just quietly canceled. They just said like, okay, now moving forward, it's going to be reruns only. There wasn't a lot of hubbub about it. And during that time and after that, Jerry Springer was pretty much, I mean, he was busy. He was always doing some sort of, I don't know, TV or movie jobs and whatnot. He's hosted like a ton of other shows and done acting appearances. We just don't have time to cover all of that. But I mean, he was on America's Got Talent. He was one of the celebrities in Dancing with the Stars. And currently he has a show called Judge Jerry, which I mean is exactly what it sounds like.
My imagination is running wild right now at the thought of that.
Yeah. I mean, I guess he does, like you said, he has his law degree, but they just cover like small claim court proceedings. So, with all of that being said, Jess, I have a very important question for you. Is Jerry Springer the worst?
You know, this is one of the tougher ones, I think, to make a decision on. I think part of me says, like, absolutely he's the worst, because I just, like, don't think that attitude around having a show that intentionally harms people and being okay with that is good for society. But I also think he had a lot of demons and, like, was maybe too smart for his own good with this show, and I don't know. It's very difficult to say.
I will add this that might help you make your decision, but he had actually confessed that he never watches the show, and he said that he's fully aware of how stupid and ridiculous the subject matter is, and he considers it nothing more than a job. Does that make it worse or better? I don't know.
Both. Again, in a weird way, because it's like you knew that it was going on, but you still profited from it and like kept it going for as long as you did. Even if you didn't agree with it, like you were still involved and you kept perpetuating it. So, I don't know.
You kept asking during this episode, like, how does he realize it? Does he even know? And the answer is, I was saving it for the end, but yeah, he knew how stupid it was. He never watched an episode, like whatever. So I don't know if Jerry Springer's the worst creative. Definitely not the best. However, Time Magazine did call his show the worst television show of all time. So at least we can like just comfortably call it that.
Yeah.
I don't know if he is the worst, but his show is really the worst. I don't know.
I think what we have here is a case of yet another flawed human, as we all are, who kind of lets some...
What are you talking about? I'm perfect.
Yeah, aren't we all? If we work for Design Pickle, we're perfect, and everyone else is flawed. But I just think that, like I said, his demons, and, you know, he definitely had some character flaws there, but, like, tried to maybe do something and make money for his family, and maybe part of that was to help his daughter with special needs. Like, there are a lot of ways to look at it, so it's very difficult to say a finite yes or no. I'm gonna go with he's sometimes the worst.
Sometimes the worst. We can deal with that. Well, that's all we have for Jerry Springer. So
it's a wild ride,
that was a wild ride. And if you think that Jerry Springer is the worst, let us know at podcastdesignpickle.com, and we would love if you could also follow us on whichever podcast platform you listen to. Give us a like, a rating, review, all that jazz. But most importantly, until next time, take care of yourself and each other.
Thanks for listening to Creatives Are the Worst.
If you like what you're hearing, or if you think that we're the worst, please leave us a review on your podcast platform of choice. We'd love to hear from you.
You can also contact us directly at podcasts@designpickle.com, and a big thanks to Design Pickle for sponsoring the show.
Join us next week as we once again try to answer the question, are creatives the worst?